Our story follows a lone adventurer who defies a taboo by eating monsters. Each time he consumes one, his dislocated hand and wounds heal, and he gains the monster's skills such as roar and bowlax. A nobleman's diary once declared that devouring monsters is forbidden in this world. For a human to eat a monster means to absorb its evil essence. The first symptom is an indescribable euphoria accompanied by physical strengthening. The second symptom brings severe headaches, nausea, and intoxication. The third symptom is sudden death or possibly transforming into a monster. Our protagonist, however, continuously slashes and consumes monsters, gaining new skills with each meal. A few minutes later, he faced a huge python while devouring another monster, acquiring agility boost and lightning cloak skills. The python swiftly lunged at him, its mouth wide open to devour him whole. He waited until he was inside its mouth, then activated his new lightning cloak skill, electrocuting the python and killing it instantly. He continued deeper into the labyrinth, killing and eating the monsters in his path, gaining even more skills. After consuming a huge spider, he acquired thread manipulation skills, which he used to trap the surrounding monsters effortlessly. Exhausted and full, he believed he could now return home safely. But his hope was shattered when he heard the sound of approaching footsteps and saw a swarm of monsters glaring at him with rage. He cursed in frustration and vowed to survive and return home alive. In the frontier city of Bologna, a territory known for its multiple labyrinths, there is one called the Miasma Labyrinth. The air inside this labyrinth continually saps the strength of visiting adventurers who loathe it. Yet our protagonist, Rude, frequents it so often that he has earned the nickname Miasma Scavenger. On the 6th floor of the dungeon, he smiled upon seeing a patch of miasma grass. He knew that miasma grass had the ability to purify the labyrinth's toxic air and was an invaluable source of income for him. As he began to harvest the grass, he resolved not to take too much, just what he needed. After gathering enough to last him around 3 days, he started to leave, smiling at his fortune. Suddenly, he heard a noise behind him and turned to see a swarm of miasma rat monsters glaring at him angrily. He rushed at the rats, which released poison in response. He knew many monsters in the labyrinth used miasma and poison, contributing to the adventurer's aversion to the place. However, these tactics were ineffective against him. He slashed one of the rats, angering the others, which then jumped at him to attack. He managed to slash another, but one rat clung to his arm and tried to bite his head. Fortunately, his arm armor blocked the attack. Just then he heard someone shout, "Fireball!" and a fireball struck the rat on his arm, throwing both him and the rat to the ground. He saw the rat explode, which surprised and stunned him for a moment. As he regained his senses, he heard an irritated voice complain about missing the target. A dark-haired man scolded a brown-haired man, who had cast the fireball, for not getting closer before attacking. Rude recognized the group from the Adventurers Guild by the emblems on their coats. The brown-haired man reached out to help Rude up, apologizing for the fireball and asking if his name was Rude. He explained that they just wanted to help since Rude seemed to be struggling. However, Rude stood up without accepting the man's hand, thanked him for the sentiment, and asked that he give a heads up before doing anything like that again. The man was annoyed and replied that was why he shouted fireball. Then a chubby man called his teammates over, excited about the miasma grass colony they had found. Rude, shocked, asked if they had been following him for his harvesting spot. The man furiously glared at him and insisted they were just fellow adventurers making a living in the labyrinth and happened to meet Rude there. They had saved him in the process. The man then angrily shouted that Rude, known as the Miasma Scavenger, couldn't even express proper gratitude, which angered Rude. However, seeing them ready to attack, he calmed down and apologized, thanking them for saving him while enduring his frustration. Later, in Bologna at the Fully Belly restaurant, Rude was thrown to the floor. A bald man shouted that Rude's presence made the food smell terrible. Another man teasingly told him they were saying this because he couldn't seem to understand it. The man then walked closer and held fire near Rude's face, taunting him that an adventurer should be able to defeat monsters. He insulted Rude, saying his skill, abnormal status nullification, was trash and didn't make him a real adventurer, which hurt and angered Rude. Abnormal status nullification was Rude's unique ability. which made him invaluable for exploring the miasma labyrinth. However, it didn't grant him the necessary skills to defeat monsters, vital for any adventurer. Without combat skills, he was unwelcome in any party and earned the nickname Miasma Scavenger because he scavenged for items in the lower levels of the labyrinth. In other words, his supposedly useless skill made him an outcast as an adventurer. Although he was a grown man, he still had to fight life-or-death battles against mere rats, making him wonder if he would spend the rest of his life as the Miasma Scavenger. The next morning, he headed to the Adventurers Guild, knowing he needed to find another miasma herb colony while he still had some money left from yesterday. He noticed the guild was unusually noisy, with adventurers bustling around. Curious, he asked the receptionist if any good requests had come in. She recognized him and informed him that a new labyrinth had been discovered. This news surprised him, as a new labyrinth meant treasures and magical items, a golden opportunity for any adventurer. He realized this was why the guild was so lively. The receptionist then told him that starting today, the price of miasma herbs would drop from 100 gold to 30 gold. Shocked, he loudly asked why. She explained that the miasma labyrinth was never popular, and with everyone heading to the new labyrinth, there would be no demand for the herbs. This news made him worry and panic. She continued, saying the new labyrinth was in the Avelio Mountains, but he wasn't allowed to go there. When he asked why, she explained that the new labyrinth's exploration requirement was to be D rank or higher, and as an E rank, he wasn't qualified. Frustrated and desperate, he pleaded with the receptionist, asking if there was any way he could join the expedition. She sighed and told him those were the rules, and even if he went, he would only end up dying in vain. Suddenly, a man appeared behind him and said that if Rude wanted to go that badly, he should join his party as a porter. The man then smiled at him softly. Later, they were on their way to the new labyrinth, traveling inside a carriage with Bayer's party. Bayer smiled and told Rude how glad he was to meet him because he needed someone to carry materials from the new labyrinth, but hadn't been able to find anyone. Rude remained silent, thinking it was probably because all the adventurers in the guild had flocked to the new labyrinth, making it difficult to secure a porter. One of Bayer's party members spoke up, asking why they were diving with a miasma scavenger of all people, and suggesting that Bayer could have found someone better. Bayer shyly told his members not to say such things. He explained that since Rude had been an adventurer for a long time, he had been a very good. It was better to have him along rather than a complete newbie. Bayer then introduced himself as the leader of the Scarlet Sword Party and introduced his members, Sasha and Rick, who were both D-rank adventurers. Root introduced himself as an E-rank adventurer and said it was a pleasure working with them. Before diving in, Bayer asked to know more about Root's status and if he minded showing his guild card. Root agreed and retrieved his guild card from his bag. He opened it to reveal he was level 7 with health 22, strength 18, endurance 16, magic 9, spirit 7, and agility 15 along with his skills. Bayer was amazed to see that Root could use fire magic. Root explained that the power was too low for use in battle, but came in handy in dark places and for cooking. Bayer laughed and told him that it was still plenty helpful, so he was counting on him. Later, they arrived at their destination, which amazed Sasha and Rick. Bayer announced their arrival at the recently discovered Avelio Labyrinth. Sasha excitedly asked if it looked like they were the first ones to arrive, and Rick eagerly suggested they start exploring immediately. They opened the gate, but their excitement quickly turned to disappointment as they saw the labyrinth was already crowded. They headed to the right and saw adventurers harvesting herbs. On the left, they saw adventurers fighting monsters. When they explored further, they found adventurers opening chests. Sasha, frustrated, shouted that there were adventurers everywhere, which was annoying. Bayer told his team that it seemed like most of the first layer had already been explored. Rick asked Sasha if she wasn't the one who said they were the first to arrive, which only pissed her off more. Rick then suggested they dive deeper, reasoning there would probably be fewer people further down. Sasha agreed, but Bayer cautioned that since it was a newly discovered labyrinth, it would be better to start by mapping the first layer. Sasha snapped, asking if she was hearing the porter giving his opinion, and Rick called Rude an old man, saying that was why he was stuck in E rank. Bayer told Sasha and Rick to quit it, assuring them Rude didn't mean any harm. Bayer then said he agreed with both of them, because if things continued like that, they wouldn't get any good results, so they would aim even deeper. Later, they arrived on the fourth layer of the Avelio labyrinth and faced a huge wolf monster. Rude was shocked and scared, but Rick easily hit the wolf with his weapon, telling Rude not to be so scared of those small fries. On the other side, Sasha used her magic to electrocute the monsters, while Bayer slashed through his side with his sword. Rude was in awe of their strength, yet he couldn't move his body. A moment later, when the last wolf fell dead, Bayer sheathed his sword. Sasha, sitting next to a treasure chest, said diving deeper was the right call, and it felt nice without the other parties around. Bayer agreed, noting that the monsters weren't too strong and they had found some treasure. Rick then called out and ordered Rude to collect the materials from the monsters he had defeated. Rude replied that he couldn't because the monsters were too damaged and their magic stones were probably shattered. Rick angrily asked what if they weren't destroyed and told him not to slack off. Pissed but powerless, Rude agreed and went to collect the materials. As he approached the wolf Rick had killed, he noticed the mangled body, with guts and blood making it smell awful. He wondered if Rick really had to go that far. Lifting a small flame on his finger, he wondered if it would be better to burn it a little. Rick noticed and laughingly said the old man had started burning the monster and asked if he was going to eat it. Rick then joked that after exploring for a while, he was starting to feel hungry and even the monster's meat looked delicious. Sasha told him to stop because it was gross and reminded him that it was taboo among adventurers to eat monsters since the mana would be absorbed into their bodies, and no one knew what would happen. Rick assured her he was joking and said when they got back, he would use his earnings to eat as much delicious food as he wanted. Suddenly, they heard a terrifying scream from a monster which horrified and stunned them. A huge monster then appeared in front of them, a minotaur, a B-rank monster. Rude couldn't believe it, wondering why such a formidable creature was in a lair so shallow. Sasha shouted that there was no way they could beat something like that and stutteringly asked what they should do, saying he would use some items and told Rude to keep an eye on the monster's movements. Rude stutteringly agreed and asked Bayer if he had a plan. Bayer smiled creepily, raised his sword, and replied that he had a great one. Suddenly, Bayer slashed Rude's back, causing him to fall in pain. Bayer called for Sasha and Rick. Rick threw his axe at Rude while using his warrior's encouragement skill, making Rude the focus of the monster's attack. Rick's axe slammed down near him, and then Sasha used her haste skill to double their speed. Rude stutteringly asked if they had planned to abandon him from the start. But Bayer just asked why they would bring the miasma scavenger otherwise, which both angered and horrified Rude. They ran away, with Bayer shouting for Rude to buy them some time. Rude cursed them in anger. When the Minotaur raised its axe, he focused his gaze and dodged its attack. He slammed to the ground but taunted the Minotaur, saying it served him right. He knew it was the end for him as the Minotaur rushed at him again. It slammed him into a wall, making him cough up blood. The force of the impact cracked and collapsed the wall behind him, revealing a hole on the other side. Both Rude and the Minotaur fell through, crashing to the floor inside the hole. Rude opened his eyes, incredulous that he was still alive. He looked to his side and saw that the Minotaur was caught under the rubble. He knew it was only a matter of time before he died too. Even if no other monsters came, he would die from blood loss or starvation before his body healed. Feeling an overwhelming hunger, he looked at the dead Minotaur, tempted to eat it. He asked himself what he was thinking, knowing that eating a monster would only lead to disaster. He closed his eyes, reflecting on the miserable life he had lived. But then he remembered an adventurer's advice from his childhood: no matter how hard or painful it gets, never give up. Driven by those words, he made a desperate decision. He began tearing into the dead Minotaur's flesh with his teeth, knowing full well the risks. A human who has depleted their magic and consumes mana-rich monster meat will have the monster's mana particles invade their body. The monsterized state is a terrifying fate, worse than death by poison, which is why it was a taboo. In a gamble to regain the blood he had lost and sate his hunger, Rude brought about an unexpected transformation. A moment later, he walked deeper into the labyrinth, dragging the Minotaur's axe. He came upon a corridor full of bat monsters hanging from the ceiling. With monstrous eyes, he growled, catching the bats' attention. They flew down to attack him, but he used his new skill, Roar, which intimidated the opponents with a thunderous sound, hitting every bat close to him. More bats descended to attack, and he used his physical boost skill, temporarily enhancing his strength. He swung the huge axe, crushing the bats to death. He grabbed one of the bats and ate it, gaining the echolocation skill, which allowed him to detect surrounding creatures even in darkness. Using this new ability, he saw more monsters deeper in the labyrinth, noticing they were coming in swarms. Confidently, he asked them which one of them is going to get eaten next. A moment later, Rude was slashing and continuously killing monsters. He noticed that the battle axe fit perfectly in his hand, and he could sense the monster's magic without even having to look at them. After killing them, he devoured them and observed that each time he consumed a monster, his injuries healed and powers surged through his body. This newfound strength helped him continue fighting the swarm of monsters confidently. Later, he emerged from the labyrinth. As the light hit his face, he was stunned and surprised. Letting go of the axe, he was overjoyed to have made it back and shouted happily that he had survived. Meanwhile, at the Adventurers Guild, the atmosphere was tense. Adventurers looked at each other in fear as an old man stood before them. The Bologna Branch Guild Master, Lankars, addressed the Scarlet Sword Party, stating that after hearing their report, he had rounded up all the adventurers in the labyrinth except for Rude, who was with them. Bayer replied that when they encountered the Minotaur on the 4th floor, Rude was killed before they had a chance to protect him, expressing frustration that they couldn't save him. Lankars acknowledged their explanation and declared the labyrinth off limits for now. Just then, the guild door opened and the receptionist was shocked to see Rude enter, stunning everyone who believed he was dead. Bayer, Sasha, and Rick began sweating in fear, and even Lankars was surprised to see him. Bayer rushed to Rude, feigning concern, and whispered threateningly that if Rude said anything unnecessary, he would kill him. Rick asked if Rude was hurt, and Sasha claimed they had tried to go back for him, but the labyrinth was closed. Rude felt Rick's grip on his shoulder tighten. Bayer then suggested sweetly that they should celebrate Rude's survival elsewhere. Bayer and Rick exchanged glances when they realized they couldn't move. Rude then shouted that they had used him as a pawn, causing panic among the Scarlet Sword Party and shock among the other adventurers. Bayer, panicking, asked what Rude was talking about. Lankars demanded to know what Rude meant by being used as a pawn. Rude explained that Bayer had stolen his supplies and attacked him from behind. Rick had used a skill to lure the Minotaur toward him, and Sasha had cast haste on the others so they could run away. Bayer, in a defensive panic, shouted at Lankars that they didn't do any of it. Lankars told them they needed to clarify the truth of the matter. Just then, the Truth Officer entered the guild, shocking everyone. They wondered why the Truth Officer, who rarely left the royal capital, was there. Lankars explained that there had been an unusually high number of deaths among the porters temporarily joining Bayer's party, so he had called in an old favor to bring the Truth Officer there. Lankars then asked the Truth Officer to determine the truth of the claims between Bayer's party and Rude. The Truth Officer's eyes lit up as she declared that the members of Scarlet Sword were lying. She raised her wand and confirmed that Rude's claim was the truth, horrifying Bayer and shocking the other adventurers. Panicking, Bayer shouted and pointed at the Truth Officer, demanding to know how she could possibly know the truth. Lankars explained that the truth skill was impossible to acquire later in life, and its effectiveness rivaled that of a unique skill, meaning no lie could pass before the truth skill. He emphasized that nothing could be more trustworthy than the words of someone who had pledged to dedicate that power to the country, glaring at Bayer in anger and making him step back. Bayer then looked at the Truth Officer and thought that if only she weren't there, none of this would be happening. In a desperate move, he launched his sword at the Truth Officer, shocking Lankars and the Truth Officer. But Rude acted quickly, blocking Bayer's sword with his own just in time. He warned Bayer not to dare touch the Truth Officer, shocking Bayer, who angrily shouted Rude's name. Rude responded by punching Bayer in the face, sending him flying into the wall with such force that the impact was visible outside the guild. Sasha and Rick were horrified, but Rude calmly told Bayer that attacking the Truth Officer was not a good idea. Later, in the Adventurers Guild reception room, Lankars apologized to Rude for bothering him when he must be tired. Rude replied that it was okay, and asked about the Scarlet Sword Party. Lankars informed him that the three would be taken in by the staff for interrogation. If it's confirmed that they repeatedly used their porters as bait, the members of Scarlet Sword would lose all their possessions and adventurer qualifications, reducing them to slaves. Given that Bayer had crossed the truth officer, he likely wouldn't appear before Rude again. Rude was surprised when Lankers placed a bag of gold on the table, explaining that since the Scarlet Sword Party lost the right to profit from the new labyrinth, Rude should receive it. There was about 200,000 gold inside. After their discussion, Rude left the room and silently stared at the bag of gold in his hand, hugging it. He realized that this money could cover his living expenses and would take a long time to accumulate by gathering miasma grass. This made him realize that adventurers could actually make good money. He noticed other adventurers silently glaring at him, guessing that no one insulted him because of what they had witnessed earlier. However, he knew this didn't mean they would be kind to him either. He also knew that standing out too much might make others suspicious of his sudden rise in status. So he guessed he'd have to continue earning in the miasma labyrinth as before. He sighed, telling himself to stop being gloomy because he finally had some money, and he could get his gear ready and eat whatever he wanted. He decided to head to the tool shop first, and was surprised when he saw a magic bag. Afterward, he decided to get something to eat. The next day, he was back in the miasma labyrinth, easily killing the rats. He couldn't believe how easily they fell when he had to avoid 5 of them just the day before yesterday. Using his appraisal skill, he looked at a dead rat on the floor. It was level 9, its race was Beast Tribe, with health 24, strength 5, mana 16, spirit 3, endurance 12, agility 27, and its skill was miasma. He figured out that the appraisal skill he obtained by eating the Cyclops monster could even be used on corpses. He grabbed his guild ID, wondering how much his status had increased, and opened it, thinking he must be around level 20 because the rat was easy to defeat. To his astonishment, he saw that he was still ranked E but had reached level 42. His health was 188, mana points 136, strength 156, spirit 112, endurance 136, and agility 125, an incredible increase from before. He couldn't believe he had reached level 42 when just yesterday he was only at level 7. Realizing how rare this was, he decided to check the skills he had acquired. He opened his skill status and was excited to see he had gained many new skills. He remembered passing by the spot where he had fallen on the way back from the new labyrinth. The wall that had been broken was now sealed, and the new labyrinth would remain closed for a while. So, he planned to lightly explore the miasma labyrinth to test his new powers and see how effective they were on the deeper floors. He glanced at his side, where he had the magic bag he bought earlier, and headed to the stairs leading to the higher floors, wanting to choose the right monster for his first try. Later, he easily cleared the 6th, 9th, and 13th floors, but was disappointed because they didn't provide a challenge. He needed to go even farther to find more suitable prey. A moment later, he arrived at the 24th floor and saw a huge monster in armor guarding the area. He saw it walking around and used his appraisal skill on it, revealing it was a lizard soldier, level 25. From the dragon tribe race with good stats and skills like one-handed swordsmanship, shield techniques, and miasma resistance. He knew they were supposed to fight in coordination with their companions, but he only saw one and smiled, thinking it might be worth a try. He appeared behind the lizard soldier to attack and swung his sword at it. The monster immediately turned to face him, but he managed to slash its arm. He taunted it, saying it wasn't bad, but he wouldn't miss next time. Confused, he watched as it started to run deeper into the 24th floor. He chased after it, wondering if it was trying to escape. He was shocked when he realized it was a dead end. Approaching cautiously, he told the lizard soldier it couldn't escape now, but it just smiled and peeked back at him, glaring. Rude felt a presence behind him, cursing under his breath. When he peeked back, he saw more lizard soldiers closing in. Realizing it was a trap, he braced himself for the impending fight. He realized he had been set up. Given the disparity in their levels, the situation was dire. Suddenly, the lizard he had been chasing attacked him. Fortunately, he dodged and faced it, thinking that if he had to, he'd take them down one by one. He jumped and attacked one of the lizards. Though it blocked his attack, the force of his strikes slammed it to the floor. As it glared at him, he raised his sword, ready to kill it, thinking he would end it right there. But another lizard, wielding a shield, blocked his attack, surprising and confusing him. Before he could react, he sensed a presence behind him and ducked just in time to dodge the lizard's attack from behind. It growled in anger, but he calmly told it that it was close and asked how many of them there were as the lizards surrounded him. He looked at them, astonished by their ambush tactics and coordination. Even if they were good at working together, their movements seemed too precise. Then he recalled a high-pitched sound just before they began coordinating. Noticing a red lizard behind the attacking soldiers, he used his appraisal skill. His power revealed it was the general lizard, level 32, a beast species with 116 health, 54 magic, 88 strength, 77 spirit, 68 endurance, and 69 agility. It had 3 skills: one-handed swordsmanship, shield technique, and command. He smiled, realizing he had found the boss. The general lizard screamed loudly, and the lizard soldiers screamed back, launching at him together. He activated his physical boost, screamed, and charged to meet them, slashing every lizard in his way. One lizard blocked his path, but he jumped on its head and vaulted over it, heading straight for the general lizard. It stared at him, and he told it he had found it. He swung his sword, but to his shock, it remained unscathed. The general lizard then launched its sword at him. Panicking, he knew he could dodge it, but instead he activated his steel body skill, becoming unscathed as well. Smiling, he told it that it wasn't the only one with a trump card, making the general lizard jump away to create distance. He activated his appraisal skill again, puzzled that there wasn't a single scratch on the general lizard despite feeling the impact. He confirmed that the general lizard didn't possess a skill that enhanced its durability, and suspected someone else's power was at play. He scanned the lizard soldiers, but couldn't see any particularly special skills. Then he found it. The lizard soldier in the far back had a substitute skill. He headed towards it, realizing it was taking the damage instead. Shocked, the lizard couldn't run away. He successfully stabbed it with his sword, telling it that it must be tough being reduced to a substitute. The lizard shook in pain and fell to the ground dead as he told it not to take it personally. The general lizard screamed in anger and charged at him with its soldiers. He used his thread manipulation skill, grabbing the thread to hang above and dodge their attacks, shocking the general lizard. Swinging the threads on his fingers, he told them that gathering together made it easier for him. He threw a thread trap at them, and though the general screamed orders, it was too late. The trap ensnared the soldiers with the general, immobilizing them. He descended in front of the shocked general, telling it that it seemed like his victory, then slashed the general lizard's head. After slashing off the general lizard's head, he swiftly dispatched the remaining soldier lizards. Once the battle was over, he exclaimed excitedly, "It's time to eat." He reached for the magic bag he had bought with the money from the guild, knowing it was finally time to use it. The magic bag's interior space was expanded by magic, and its weight was completely reduced when closed. He took out his cooking utensils and seasonings from the bag. He then began to skin the general lizard, reflecting on how, when he was on the hidden floor, he had been desperate to survive, but had always wanted to try this. After expertly carving a perfect piece of meat from the lizard, he placed it on the pan and added some seasoning, wondering if monster meat could be delicious if cooked properly. As he watched the meat cook, his mouth watered. Taking a big bite, he chewed thoughtfully, amazed at how delicious it was. He continued eating, marveling aloud. Who would have thought monster meat could be so good? I might get addicted to this. As he ate, he acquired 4 skills: one-handed swordsmanship, shield technique, miasma resistance, and command. He pondered how monster meat could be so good, and whether it was related to the magic powers the monsters possess. He recalled the skills from the Minotaur, Armor Spider, and Evil Eye, which had been quite helpful. He also remembered the Thunder Wolf and the Black Serpent, whose skills he hadn't yet tried. After finishing his meal, he stood up excitedly, planning to try eating a variety of monsters on his way back. He looked down and saw the lizard with the substitute skill, making a mental note of its usefulness. A moment later, in the miasma labyrinth on the 21st floor, he encountered flying monsters and frog monsters. Activating his lightning cloak skill, he electrocuted them to death effortlessly, clearing the floor. He realized his lightning cloak skill was highly effective, especially against monsters specializing in inflicting status ailments. They had picked the wrong opponent. Taking out his pan, he excitedly declared, "Frog meat and insect dishes, coming right." He cooked the meats, making a fried chicken-like dish from the two monsters' meats. He happily eats the dish, noticing how soft the poison frog is and how the seasoning reminds him of Morpho, making him crave a beer. As he finishes, he acquires 5 new skills: venom, temperature variation, poison scale powder, paralysis scale powder, and aerial slash. Suddenly, he hears a loud crash and what sounds like a human voice. Curious and cautious, he wonders if other adventurers have made it this far. Quickly, he packs his pan into his magic bag, thanking it for the meal, and runs toward the source of the sound. It's rare to see other parties in combat, and he hopes he might exchange valuable information with them. Meanwhile, a scene of violence unfolds nearby. A man's sword drips with blood as a group of men gathers around a woman lying on the ground bleeding. She clutches her wounded shoulder, gasping for breath, while the men taunt her, mocking her for still having so much magic left. The man with the sword smirks, remarking that the trouble was worth it. He pulls down her head coat, revealing her elven features, and the greedy men smile as he wonders aloud how much she might be worth. But then Root arrives just in time and addresses the men, expressing his hope to make some adventurer friends, surprising them. He steps closer, stating that, while he doesn't know the full story, he can't stand by and watch a woman being attacked. The man with the sword demands to know who he is, and he replies that he is an adventurer. The woman, desperate, shouts a warning. Those men are adventurer hunters. Realization dawns on him. Adventurer hunters are notorious high-ranking adventurers. Using his appraisal skill, he identifies the man who stabbed the woman as Falses, level 65, in a miasma state. However, he's shocked to find he can't see Falses' status and rank. He checks the 3 other men and discovers he can't see their statuses, skills, or ranks either. They must have concealment skills or counter magic tools. Falses orders his men to take him down, and the confrontation begins. One of the men, named Xerius, launched an attack on him. He was surprised by Xerius's speed, but fortunately, he managed to block the attack with his sword. Xerius teasingly remarked that he was doing pretty well, to which he replied that it was because Xerius was weak. This comment infuriated Xerius, who pressed his sword harder against him, shouting that he was not weak and that he was going to smash his head in. The other 2 men watched the confrontation silently. He inhaled deeply and activated his venom skill, spitting venom onto Xerius's face. The venom melted Xerius's face, causing him to scream in agony. The other men called out to Xerius in panic, questioning if he had just spit venom. They both thought it was almost as if he were a monster. He knew it was a reckless way of fighting, completely unlike the typical adventurer, but it was how he, a weak person, had survived. False has asked if that poison was a unique skill, acknowledging that it looked like he couldn't be underestimated. False has then ordered his men to charge at him, all 3 of them. The 2 men moved forward first, swinging their swords at him from different sides. He realized that if he stopped dodging for even a second, he'd be killed. He jumped backward to create distance between himself and the 2 men, but suddenly a foot appeared in front of him. He was shocked to see Falses ready to kick his head. He immediately activated his steel body skill. Falses' kick connected and he was thrown into the poisonous swamp. Falses realized he was tough, certain he had broken his neck. He stood up while the brown-haired man excitedly declared that he was going to snuff out his life right away. However, he just stood up and ran deeper into the swamp, prompting the man to shout at him not to start running now. When the man was about to chase after him, Falses ordered him to stop, warning that the poisonous swamp wasn't a place one could venture into and come out alive. He reminded the man that they shouldn't be able to withstand the poisonous swamp either, and that he would come out soon enough. A moment later, he was still in the swamp. They asked him how long he planned to stay in that poisonous swamp and told him they should compete like adventurers. He knew he was lucky to have fallen into the poisonous swamp. On top of the usual miasma, the poisonous vapors around the swamp would also rapidly drain the adventurer's stamina. The men were exhausted from the poison surrounding them and asked how long he planned to stay in the swamp. It had been about 10 minutes already, and they felt their heads hurt and their bodies grow sick. He walked out of the poisonous swamp, thinking it should be about time. He wanted to weaken them further, but if he took any longer, the situation would worsen since the lady was injured. As he approached them, he asked how it felt to be affected by both poison and miasma. The men in return asked if he had finally given up, telling him he had caused them a lot of trouble. He calmly replied that, unfortunately, he was unaffected by any status abnormalities, so he didn't really know how much pain they were all feeling. Falsis was infuriated when he realized that he had the abnormal status nullification skill and had tricked them. Falsis shouted orders to his men to kill him immediately. The men rushed at him. One of the men tried to slash him, but he easily blocked the attack, surprising the man. He pushed the man back, smiling as he explained that the poison in the swamp gradually drained their stamina and the accumulated miasma inside their bodies lowered their stats. He sensed someone approaching from the side and saw the brown-haired man ready to attack. He immediately used his steel body skill. When the man struck, his sword hit steel, shocking and confusing him. He then released electricity, activating his lightning cloak skill, which electrocuted the two men. One of the men died, but the brown-haired man, still conscious, tried to attack again, cursing in anger. He released a strong power from his hand, using his aerial slash skill to strike. Falsis, watching, couldn't believe he possessed venom, a steel body, a lightning cloak, and even the aerial slash skill. Fear gripped Falsis as he asked why in the world a human had monster skills, but he rushed at Falsis, replying that he had no obligation to explain. He attacked Falsis, who tried to block, thinking that despite his supposed superiority in fighting humans, the miasma was going to cause his defeat. In a rage, Falsis used his agility enhancement and launched his sword at him with all his might, unable to accept losing to someone like him. Brood activated his physical boost and counterattacked. One of their swords broke in half. It was Falsi's sword. Falsi's body fell to the ground in half, but Rude knew that without the abnormal statuses, Falsis would have been much stronger. Then helped the lady, who thanked him for saving her, saying she didn't know what would have happened without him. He replied that he couldn't just leave her in that situation. He noticed that she was trying to be brave, but her body was still affected by the miasma. He told her he did what he could for first aid, but he knew it was rare to see an elf in such a remote area. He wondered what circumstances had led her to be chased by adventurer hunters. Suddenly, the labyrinth shook with a loud scream, and they encountered a huge moth blocking their way. He activated his appraisal skill, guessing it must be the leader of those moths. It was Mosphis's great level 37 species insect. And it had skills like poison scales, paralyzing scales, poison resistance, miasma resistance, aerial slash, and moth eyes. He jumped to gain height and launched his sword at it, taunting that mere size wouldn't bring him down. The moth released an aerial slash, which made him panic, but he managed to dodge it. The lady narrowly avoided being hit as well. He asked if she was okay, to which she replied yes. Then he mockingly called the Mosphis great a beast for scaring him, promising to return the favor. He questioned the moth if it thought flying put it out of his reach. Activating his aerial slash skill, he threw it at the moth, shattering its wings and body. Enraged, it attacked with paralyzing scales, but he let them hit him, teasing that paralysis had no effect on him. However, he suddenly realized the danger to the lady as the Mospha's great aimed for her. She lifted her wand, releasing a powerful gust of air that dispelled the paralyzing scales. He was surprised but expected such power from an elf. A few minutes later, they defeated the Mospha's great. She asked if poison and paralysis didn't affect him either, noting that his skills were almost like a monster's. This made him wonder how to explain it, but then she doubled over in pain, causing him to panic. He asked if she was hit by the paralyzing scales, but she said no, it was something different. She then told him that once they got out of there, she would share her story. A moment later, they managed to escape the miasma labyrinth and sat down at the foot of a huge tree outside. She sighed and, smiling, told him that it felt much better now that she was out of the labyrinth. She then introduced herself as Alicia, a former adventurer. He was surprised to hear her name and asked if she was Alicia of the Emerald Storm, making her laugh and confirmed that he knew her. He explained that he knew of the kingdom of Ludeus's renowned S-rank party, Azure Trails, and that everyone knew its members. However, if he recalled correctly, Azure Trails had disbanded. She agreed, explaining that 5 years ago, they were defeated by monsters. On that day, they challenged the monster awaiting them at the deepest part of the S-rank labyrinth, the Abyssal Labyrinth. In that battle, their leader died. One member had to retire due to severe injuries, another was swallowed by the labyrinth, and she herself did not come out unscathed. She then pulled her shirt down slightly, making him panic and ask what she was doing. He stopped when he saw the mark on her chest. She explained that it was a curse placed on her at that time, the curse of level down. He calmed down and told her he had never heard of such a curse before. She replied that she hadn't either and had tried every possible method to break it, but all she could do was slow its progression. She also revealed that the adventurer hunters knew about her curse and planned to profit from it. She knew she would die if her level reached 0, but she couldn't bear being at such guy's mercy. He looked at her sadly in silence, but then realized something. He told her he might be able to help with her curse. He took out his adventurer ID and saw that he had a substitute skill that allowed him to take on others' attacks and status ailments. He asked her if she could trust him to activate the skill, which confused her at first, but she agreed. He placed his hand on her shoulder and activated his substitute skill. She was surprised to see the curse transfer to him. She shouted for him to stop, warning that the curse would affect him. He smiled and assured her that it was all right and she should trust him. She looked up in horror as the curse reached him, but then a bright light stopped it. He had activated his unique skill, Abnormal Status Nullification, which dissolved the curse into dust. He removed his hand from her shoulder, glad that it seemed to be working. She was stunned and asked what had happened. He told her to check her guild card. She did, and saw that her status had returned to normal. She couldn't believe the curse had been lifted. He explained that his unique skill, Abnormal Status Nullification, might nullify her curse if he took it on. She called him an idiot for taking such a risk for someone he just met, but then tearfully and happily thanked him. He smiled, welcoming her while comforting her. Later, in the Bologna Tavern, Alicia slammed her mug of beer on the table and happily burped. She told him that the food was cheap and the alcohol was delicious, which meant he sure did know a good place. He gave her a thumbs up in response, remembering how they got kicked out last time. He then asked if she was okay drinking that much, reminding her that she had been badly injured just a moment ago. She replied that she had come back and recovered. She then clinked her mug against his, asking excitedly how they could not drink on such an auspicious day. He asked her what she planned to do from now on, to which she replied that she would like to know more about him first, which surprised him. She then asked why he decided to become an adventurer. He replied that long ago, the village he lived in was attacked by monsters. Because of those monsters, he lost his family and friends, but thanks to an S-rank adventurer who rushed to the scene, faced the monsters that were about to devour him, and killed them, he survived. He would never forget the sight of that adventurer. Because of that, he wanted to become an S-rank adventurer himself someday, so he could save many people as well. She smiled and told him it was a noble goal. He asked if she wasn't going to laugh, and she replied that she also dreamed of reaching S-rank herself. Besides, she intended to gain more power than she had before she was cursed. She also mentioned that she was certain her companions were still trapped in the deepest part of the Abyssal Labyrinth. Regardless of the outcome, she intended to challenge that monster once again. But for now, at least until they had both gained enough strength to achieve their goals, she suggested they form a party together. He was about to respond when someone grabbed Elish's hand, remarking that he had quite the fine girl to drink with and calling him a miasma scavenger, which made him remember that they were the men from before. The men surrounded them, telling Alicia not to drink with a boor like him and asking her to join them instead. He grabbed one of the men and ordered him to let go of her. The man, pissed, grabbed his collar and called him a little shit. He glared furiously at the two men and they stared back. Alicia shouted at them to stop, reminding them they were in a pub and if they wanted to fight, they should do something else. A moment later, she was sitting with the two men, their beers in front of them. She shouted that they should settle it by seeing who could drink the most, which cheered everyone up. The two men, thinking they would win, started drinking eagerly. The mugs of beer piled up on their table, and the other patrons cheered. He smiled as he watched Alicia, and the pub became lively and happy. A moment later, the two men were down and drunk, but Alicia was still energetic, making the other patrons cheer for her and announce her as the winner. She looked at him proudly, and he gave her a thumbs up. They then walked to the side, and he told her she did great, considering she had already drunk quite a lot before the drinking contest. She laughed proudly and told him that he was her benefactor, and she hadn't fallen so low that she would just sit still when her benefactor was being ridiculed. However, the alcohol soon got to her and she collapsed against his chest. He smiled, thinking it couldn't be helped. He used his substitute skill on her once again, and she woke up feeling fine. He explained that he transferred her drunkenness to himself because he couldn't get drunk. She excitedly told him that he first lifted her curse and now her drunkenness, calling his skill wonderful and insisting they should definitely form a party together. She then headed back to the other men, telling them they should drink some more. The men responded that she should do it in moderation. She then looked at the special salt-grilled Barnavas in the frame and sadly said it was too bad she couldn't try their special dish. The chef explained that it seemed a monster had taken up residence in the Barnavas fishing grounds and that he had already sent a request to the guild. However, all the top adventurers were currently out. The chef then asked if they would be willing to take on the request. The next day, at the Barnavas fishing ground, they arrived at the sea. Belisha excitedly remarked that it was the Barnavas fishing grounds. She then told him they should defeat the monsters immediately and enjoy some special dishes, to which he agreed. Suddenly, he felt something on his side and immediately dodged an attack from beneath the water. He alerted her that the monster the chef had mentioned was there, but they were both shocked to realize they were surrounded by multiple monsters. She exclaimed that there was no way they could kill them all. They then noticed more monsters below their boat. Using his appraisal skill, he identified the creatures as Jernabes, level 23, with a middle status and possessing 3 skills: high-speed swimming, water bullets, and snipe. One of the Jernabes hurled a water bullet at them, which he blocked with his sword. However, when the Jernabes attacked together, he panicked, struggling to block all the projectiles that came one after another. Realizing he couldn't fend them off indefinitely, he leapt into the sea, shocking Alicia. He landed in the midst of the Jernabes and taunted them by calling them small fry. Daring them to attack him all at once, the Jernabes charged at him with their high-speed swimming. He then released electricity and attacked them with his lightning cloak, electrocuting them and illuminating the underwater scene. The Jernabes floated dead in the water, and he lifted his head to catch his breath. Alicia wordly called his name and he assured her that everything was fine. However, he knew some Jernabes remained, and noticed they were deep underwater. This made him wonder if they were being cautious or protecting something. He shouted to Alicia that he was going to dive deeper to investigate. He also told her that he had a request, which confused her. Afterward, he swam deeper into the sea with a rope tied around his body. The Jernabes weren't fleeing, indicating they were protecting something. He was shocked to see a huge monster surrounded by Jernabes. Using his appraisal skill, he identified it as a Tentaclus, level 38. It had 4 skills: paralysis poison, autotomy, poison resistance, and accelerated healing. He thought it might be a giant sea anemone or a hermit crab, but then he saw one of its tentacles crack, fall off, and transform into a Jernabe. He realized the Tentaclus was creating the Jernabes. He swam up, knowing that defeating the Tentaclus was crucial. Without defeating it, killing Jernabes would be pointless, since the Tentaclus wasn't attacking. He decided to prepare, unaware of a tentacle near his foot. Suddenly, the tentacle wrapped around his leg, pulling him down. He was shocked to see it dragging him back, and then the Jernabes rushed to attack, making him realize their previous hesitation was a distraction to divert his attention from the tentacle's feelers. He then grabbed the tentacle near him, thinking that if it wanted to play, he would play back. Activating his lightning cloak, he electrocuted the Jernabes and the tentacle monster. He knew that as long as it touched him directly, even the huge creature would be electrocuted. However, he was surprised when the tentacles he electrocuted broke off. He remembered the auto-tome skill and realized that the creature had avoided a fatal injury by immediately severing its feelers as soon as they were struck by lightning. The monster then lunged at him, catching him off guard. Feeling his breath running out, he quickly pulled the rope tied around his body. Alicia saw this and used her wind power to move the boat, pulling the rope and dragging him away just in time to avoid the attack. The tentacles glared furiously at him, but he floated to the surface. Moments later, they were on the shore and he lay on the sand, catching his breath. Alicia asked him wordly if he was okay. He sat up and told her that, thanks to her, he was, and that she had saved him. He then explained that there was a boss deep underwater continuously producing gurnaibs, and that it also had accelerated healing skills, so he needed to hurry back. She pointed out that the monsters had a huge advantage over them in the water, and that her magic wouldn't reach down there either. When she asked if he had a plan, he replied that there was one way, but he needed to make up his mind. He reminded himself that Alicia had told him about her curse, and even formed a party with him, so before she could reply, he had to tell her his secret. He then walked closer to a dead gurnave and begged her not to tell anyone what he was about to show her. A moment later, the tentacles and the gurnaves were peacefully under the sea, but then the tentacles sensed someone approaching. It saw him diving down at high speed, using his swimming skills. The gurnaves rushed to meet and stop him, but he easily slashed through them with his sword while continuously diving deeper. The tentaclus's tentacles moved to attack him, but he skillfully dodged them and rushed towards its head. He then stabbed its body and, declaring that he would finish it, used his lightning cloak to directly electrocute the creature. He successfully kills the tentacle monster, knowing that with it gone, the fishing spot should return to its peaceful state. However, he's concerned about Alicia because, after seeing him devour a monster, he wonders how she is feeling and what she will say when they get back. He rises from the sea and feels sad when he sees that Alicia is not on the shore. Smiling sadly, he walks to the shore, wondering why he assumed she would wait for him. He tells himself that he got his hopes up again, but then he is surprised when he hears her telling him that he is late. He sees her holding a branch of trees and asking if he is hurt and if he took down the boss. He stutteringly replies, yes. She is glad, explaining that she couldn't just sit still while waiting, so she started gathering some branches for the campfire because it's good for drying clothes. He is stunned in surprise and asks her if she is okay with what she saw him do. She replies that it did surprise her quite a bit, but he trusted her enough to reveal his secret, which made her happier than anything else. Awkwardly, he thanks her and tells her he understands. Then he remembers something and surprises her by pulling a fishing net out of the sea. He tells her he wants to get the boss's skill as well, so he cut off a part to bring it back, thinking it might be strange if only he ate. He grabs the fish next to the boss meat as she walks closer. Showing the fish to her, he tells her it's a barnamaz he brought back. He thinks it might be weird to eat next to a monster, but he hopes she will like it. When he looks back, he sees her excitedly shout that she'll eat it, making him laugh. He tells her that while they are eating, he'll tell her about the first time he ate a monster. Once they are all set and have eaten their food, Alicia tells him that it is so delicious and that she understands why he eats monsters. She knows there is a reason for it. He replies that thanks to it, he, a Destiny rank weakling, got a step closer to his dream. She tells him that she understands and that he used that power to save her from adventurer hunters and the curse. She also remarks that when the food is cooked like this, monsters taste quite delicious, while looking at the jernabi fillets and miso braised tentacles. He excitedly agrees with her, telling her that, surprisingly, monsters taste pretty good. He also tells her that he doesn't actually need to eat jernabi anymore, but he wants to try cooking it properly. He asks her if she would like to try it, to which she replies that there is no guarantee she'll survive with the same symptoms, so she'll pass. After eating her barnamas, Alicia once again asks him if he will join her party. He becomes quiet and asks if she doesn't have stronger acquaintances. She replies that it's been 5 years since she got cursed, and even if they didn't die in the labyrinth, considering the human lifespan, many of her acquaintances might have retired. Also, most adventurers on the front lines have quite a few screws loose, so no matter how strong they are, she can't trust them to watch her back. For adventuring together, she wants someone she can trust with ease of mind, and if it was him, she thinks she could do that, which surprises him. He then closes his eyes to think for a moment, smiles, and agrees to form a party with her. The next morning, they head to the Adventurers Guild Barona branch. Alicia excitedly tells him that they should get ready for their first job as a party. He responds that with one of them being E rank, he doubts they'll get any big requests. She replies that he is probably right, so she had planned for their first time. They enter the Adventurer Guild and head to the receptionist. Alicia tells the receptionist that they are forming a party today and asks if she can register them while giving her guild card. The receptionist is shocked when she sees that Alicia is an S-rank adventurer, known as Alicia of the Emerald Storm, with a level of 43, high status, a spirit magic unique skill, and many other skills. The receptionist asks why someone like her is partying with a miasma scavenger, but Alicia leans closer in anger. The receptionist fearfully tells her it was nothing and that she understands. Alicia then asks about ranking him up and rudely inquires about the missing requirements. The receptionist looks at his record and replies that he has gathered enough achievements, but his battle record is lacking. Alicia then asks for the highest difficulty subjugation requests they can take on together. The receptionist immediately agrees and tells them that right now it would be the extermination of a pack of gray wolves. Later, they arrive at the mission site. He notices that the gray wolves are only level 11, with low status and only scent detection skills. He uses his stealth skill to get closer to the wolves without them noticing him. When he lifts the stealth, the wolves notice him, but it is too late. He swiftly slashes them with his sword. The distant wolves see the danger and howl to call the rest of the pack. The pack of wolves appears and rushes to attack, but he shouts to Alicia that he'll leave the reinforcements to her. She agrees and releases her power to call Sylphide. She then tells Sylphide to lend her power, and he is surprised to see it, knowing it is her unique skill, spirit magic. Sylphide heads towards the wolves coming Alicia's way. Alicia orders Sylphide to release a great wind to slice through them, which she does, slashing the wolves in front of her into pieces and making the forest shake with the force of her power. He looks at the slashed ground, thinking that it is tremendous power and there is no way one would be able to dodge it. She tells him that her power before getting cursed won't come out after all. He replies with a thumbs up and can't imagine what it would have been like at full strength. Suddenly, he feels danger behind him. When he looks back, a wolf is close to biting his head off. He curses in panic, realizing there are still so many of them hiding, and he can't block the wolf's attack in time. Alicia shouts for Sylphide, and they all vanish, confusing the wolf, which looks around for them. The wolf then hears them from above and sees them floating in the air. He excitedly asks her if she can do something like that too. He thanks her for saving his life, but she tells him that if he is thankful, he should thank that little one instead while looking at Sylphide. She then looks down and tells him that they can't let their guard down because she saw about 5 more wolves watching them from the bushes, and there are probably a lot more hiding. He tells her that it's his turn and uses his echolocation skill, which makes him see more packs of wolves hiding in the bushes around them. He smiles, knowing that combined with the ones they had already taken down, they'd achieve their goal at once. He then tells Alicia to attack where he indicates. The wolves are shocked when they see a bright green light heading in their direction, which makes them come out from hiding. She continuously attacks the side bushes, making the wolves run away from their hiding spots. Meanwhile, he hides in the middle bush. Knowing that echolocation loses precision in open spaces, and even Alicia can't target too many spots accurately at once. However, if they attack from the sides, they can herd the gray wolves into one place. A moment later, she sighs, having done her part. When the wolves are gathered together in one spot, he comes out of hiding and uses his paralyzing breath skill, causing the wolves to collapse and become unable to move. He then grabs his sword and starts killing them. An hour later, he tells her that there are 52 wolves in total. She excitedly responds that she can't believe they encountered so many in one day. He tells her that maybe their numbers have just increased that much. He then asks her if it was spirit magic she used earlier. She replies yes, and explains that she can use magic by borrowing power from the spirits that exist in nature. She then introduces him to Sylphide and explains that spirits are generally everywhere, even though they don't show themselves. To use their power, one needs to offer magic as compensation. Even so, powerful magic can be cast with little magic energy. As he saw earlier, Sylphide can cause phenomena such as floating in the air. Sylphide flies down onto his head, and he tells her that he had never heard of wind magic that strong before. Sylphide pulls his hair, causing him pain, and he tries to take Sylphide off his head. Alicia explains that Sylphide loves to play pranks, and the more he reacts, the more she enjoys it. She then calls Sylphide and tells him that the sky will be dark soon, and she wants to get back quickly. She makes him float in the air and tells him that they should fly back part of the way today. They begin to fly back to the Adventurer Guild, and he excitedly tells her that it is the best. He then asks her what other types of spirit magic she can use. She replies that she specializes in water, ice, light, and earth, but spirits of darkness and fire aren't a good match for her. If a spirit has bad compatibility with him, it demands an enormous amount of magic power, and they might not even lend him power at all. Sylphide floats in front of him, while Alicia tells him that it means Sylphide likes him too. Sylphide then pulls his ear, making him point at her, and asks Alicia if Sylphide likes him even with that. She laughingly replies yes, but then Sylphide stops when they both see something ahead of them. He tells Alicia that smoke is rising there. She tells him that there should be a village in that direction. Unbeknownst to them, a huge monster is the cause of the fire,
destroying everything in its path. People run in panic as the flames spread, and the monster continues its relentless march. Suddenly, the monster stops upon encountering two people. One of them, kneeling, mutters that the wolves weren't the only monsters in the area, wondering why a Baphomet would be there. The monster then creates a magic circle, terrifying the warrior. Something begins to emerge from the circle, taking the form of a spear. The Baphomet fires it at high speed toward the two men, but suddenly a water shot hits the spear, saving them. One of the men is confused by what's happening when, through the flames, a man appears. It's Rude, who used his water bullet skill. Beside him is a small water spirit. The monster stares directly at him, but Alicia uses the distraction and appears behind the two men, asking if they're okay. She explains that she and the protagonist will take care of the monster and asks them to summarize what happened. While Alicia talks to the two men, the protagonist advances and uses his eye to analyze the enemy. The system reveals that the Baphomet is level 27. Rude reflects that although the monster's level is lower than the lizard he faced before, its stats are on another level, indicating it's no ordinary monster. More magic circles begin to form around the Baphomet. The protagonist watches closely, recognizing this as an advanced ability tied to magical principles. The monster begins its attack, forcing Rude to dodge. He thinks his magic is too weak to be used in battle, but keeps advancing. The monster, surprised by his boldness, watches as the protagonist draws closer. Rude leaps to attack, thinking that if he could devour this monster, it would be perfect, as he'd be able to use its magic in battle too. He tries to strike, but the monster blocks the blow with its hand. Surprised, Rude notes its toughness and wonders if that ability is Iron Claw. If it is, he'll have to rely on brute strength to overcome it. Taking advantage of the close range, the Baphomet unleashes 4 more attacks. An explosion rocks the area, and the elf is startled by the impact. However, the protagonist appears unharmed, and Alicia runs to him, asking if he's okay. He confirms he is, while analyzing the monster. Rudy realizes that the Baphomet used 2 attacks to strike and 2 to defend, making it a strategically difficult opponent. Alicia informs him that the monster raised its guard, and that they need to exchange information while they can, stressing that the villagers haven't fully evacuated yet. She had already called for help with the evacuation, and emphasizes that minimizing collateral damage is the priority, limiting her ability to use stronger spells. While fighting the Baphomet, Rude deduces that Alicia must be low on mana due to the previous battle. He decides that the responsibility to handle the situation falls on him. Suddenly, Alicia asks for permission to use her magic, surprising Rude. However, she shows confidence and asks him to trust her. Determined, Rude charges forward, ignoring the monster's attacks and focusing on his own strike. Meanwhile, Alicia begins casting water magic. Her blasts collide with the monster's attacks, protecting the protagonist. Rude is impressed by Alicia's ability to cancel out the Baphomet's spells with equally powerful opposing magic. Sensing the threat, the monster begins using another spell, levitating several stones and hurling them toward the two. Alicia, however, remains calm and uses her magic to make the stones crash into each other. Rude realizes she's conserving mana, avoiding collateral damage with impressive magical control. He smiles, acknowledging that this is expected of an S rank. With Alicia's protection, Rudy finally reaches the monster and leaps to attack, now using physical reinforcement. This time, he easily breaks through the Baphomet's defense, delivering a devastating blow. The monster, full of rage, tries to strike Rude with its other hand, but the protagonist stands still, trusting completely in his partner. A few seconds later, a fire attack hits the Baphomet directly. The monster screams in pain while Alicia, from a distance, controls the flames that consume it. She smiles and taunts the Baphomet, asking how it feels to taste its own power. The monster burns until it stops moving. With the danger gone, the villagers watch the scene, terrified by the monster's scream. A young man, still confused, wonders if the explosion and the scream mean that the two adventurers have won. An injured man laments that he couldn't help in the battle. Suddenly, Alicia appears, thanking the young man for helping with the evacuation. He asks if she's okay, and the elf smiles, saying yes, confirming that the Baphomet was defeated. However, she warns that although she landed a fatal blow, if the monster somehow survived, it might attack again. They need to locate the Baphomet to finish the battle, and that's why she wants to ask the villagers for help. The young man shouts that if the monster is within reach, they'll do everything they can to help. She starts laughing and the young man looks a bit confused. Alicia says that if they have any food to share, she'd be grateful because she's starving. Later in the forest around the village, the protagonist is preparing Baphomet meat. Alicia arrives cheerful, saying she's back. He greets her and asks how the villagers are. She says everyone managed to escape safely thanks to the two adventurers who helped with the evacuation. Alicia sits beside the protagonist and explains that she told everyone they were after the Baphomet, so no one would suspect the body had disappeared. Rude apologizes for making her lie and thanks her for the help. He starts to drool, saying he's hungry, and the Baphomet soup looks delicious. Rudy finishes the dish with some mugwort and ginger while Alicia watches. He tastes it and smiles, saying it's delicious, though it has a strong goat flavor. The little elf drools as she watches him eat. While he eats, new skills are acquired. Alicia watches the protagonist eating and comments that it looks delicious. However, seeing someone eating a humanoid monster is a bit strange. The protagonist stops eating and thinks that she's right. What's even stranger is that he's already used to eating it. While they're sitting around the fire, another monster appears near them. 3 level 22 monsters, the Stompers, stare at them. The elf yells that the monsters have arrived, and the protagonist says there are too many monsters in the area. Rude stands up, saying that if it's come to this, it's time to test his new magic. Everyone goes silent, and nothing happens. Rude asks what's going on. The Stompers begin attacking. The protagonist is caught off guard, and the boar charges through, hitting the camp and causing a small explosion. The Baphomet soup is thrown to the ground. Alicia yells, saying she thought the protagonist was going to use magic now. Rude starts to get up, irritated, and says he's low on mana and won't be able to help much. But this is unforgivable. The elf is confused by this. The protagonist looks at the food on the ground and says he removed all the impurities from the monster to prepare that dish, which took a lot of time. He says he really wanted to savor that meat, so he used the best seasoning. Those pigs will have to pay for that. Anger takes over the protagonist, his eyes shine, and he yells that now he's going to eat those damn creatures. Alicia panics and shakes him, shouting for him to calm down. She explains that the skill the Stompers use is called Swift Step. It increases their acceleration strength, making all their attacks powerful. In other words, even if it's not ideal, they need to fight from a distance to avoid the reach of Swift Step. The boars keep staring at them, and she says that, to sum it up, they need to retreat now. The two run, and the boars chase after them. The night passes, and the boars are still looking for them. They're both up in a tree. The elf thinks that it looks like they'd managed to lose the boars. She starts whispering about the magic he couldn't use. Rude explains that he's never had problems using the abilities he's acquired until now. Alicia asks him to analyze it with his analysis eye. The protagonist agrees and realizes she's right, then begins using the eye. He gets confused because they say he should understand it instinctively. The elf thinks for a moment and says that if he still can't use it, there must be a reason. She pauses and says he's so dumb and his brain is so limited, that's probably why he couldn't grasp the magic. Rude comments that was kind of rude. She keeps thinking and says that the protagonist can use fire magic, even if it's weak. So that doesn't explain why he couldn't use the other abilities. Suddenly, the elf gets an idea. She says that maybe to use magic or monster abilities, he needs to learn to manipulate mana. Rudy says now he understands. It's not enough to just have the magic. You have to manipulate mana. Alicia says she doesn't know much about mana, but it might be similar to absorbing monster abilities. The protagonist says he'll give it a try. He starts to concentrate and remembers the time he ate the Minotaur. At that moment, his arm and wounds were healed. Soon after, a power begins to radiate from his body. Rude thinks that if he can manipulate this power outside his body, he'll feel strength rising in his arm. The elf is surprised by what she sees. The protagonist opens his eyes slowly and is also surprised by what he sees. He had created several magic circles in front of him. Rudy feels satisfied, thinking he managed to make it work. He fires the attacks, thinking that if he can feel the mana, he can use it as if it were part of his body. The Stampings look up and see the attacks coming. The explosion is so powerful it causes a massive impact. The three boars don't survive. Wasting no time, Rude runs over and starts frying the beast meat. Excited, he says stamping ribs are going to be the perfect dish. He turns to Alicia and apologizes for taking so long, but she says it's okay, since it was something he needed to do. Alicia begins to explain that Rude needs to use mana, not magic, to activate his abilities. Based on the last attack, the protagonist didn't end up exhausted. It looks like Rude will be able to use this skill consistently. He agrees to saying that as soon as he felt the mana spreading through his body, he instantly understood how to use it. And if mana can replace magic power, maybe Rude can use it to strengthen his body and weapons. Among adventurers, many choose to train their magical abilities, and most use them in close combat. By channeling magical power through the body, their skills improve, and if used on a weapon, the attack power increases. It's even possible to release magical slashes. The elf says now she understands, pointing out that the protagonist didn't have much magic before, and that's why he couldn't use the abilities. He finishes preparing the dish and says he has much more mana now than before. But more importantly, it seems he can recover mana by eating more monsters. He eats a piece of stamping and absorbs a quick step ability. Alicia watches, thinking that Rude can absorb mana through food and even store it in his body. She looks at his food, drooling, and thinks those pork ribs look delicious. The protagonist sees her drooling and asks if she wants some. The elf hesitates, trying to hide it. Suddenly they hear another noise and something is coming toward them. The two look to the side and another monster appears. A super stamping stands before them. Rude says the boss has finally arrived. The boar charges at Alicia. Alicia. She freezes because the boss is too fast and she won't be able to dodge. Rude sees this and uses quick step to save her from the attack. The elf thanks him once again for saving her life. She looks at the boss and thinks that the moment she felt something in the distance, it was already in front of her. She's confused because they're not in a dungeon. A monster like that shouldn't be here. Suddenly, the protagonist starts getting angry, saying it's always the same thing. The food he prepared was ruined again. He yells at the boss to stop interrupting. He asks if that boss would make a good roast, but quickly rethinks it since it has fire resistance. Still, if they throw it into the crater to fry, it might turn out good. That's the stamping cane level 38. Rude thinks its stats are pretty strong too. He crouches down and starts using earth magic. The boss only has quick step and fire resistance. A hand starts rising from the ground, and the protagonist tells the boss to get ready to feel the wrath of a glutton. But the king breaks the attack easily, leaving Rude stunned, thinking that thing was made of iron. The monster lands a direct hit on the protagonist, sending him flying. Rude crashes into a tree and passes out. Alicia gets worried, but there's no time as the boss is heading toward her. She summons Sylphite and uses wind attacks to hurt the boss. The elf starts breathing calmly. She thinks she hit the boss, but he's not using magic. His muscles and fur are as thick as armor. She stands no chance against that. The king ends up face to face with her. Alicia tenses up, thinking he's going to come at her with full force. The boss starts getting ready to attack again. Suddenly, an immense pressure is felt and a ferocious roar echoes through the forest, stopping the boss. Rude is furious. He gets up, telling the pig not to dare ignore him because they're not done yet. Rude thinks he can't use quick step or iron body right now. And if it turns into a battle of endurance, there's a chance the damn pig might target the elf. The protagonist analyzes the situation but realizes he doesn't have a skill to finish the boss in a single blow, even if he runs in a straight line. With no other option, he closes his eyes, thinking this will be the first time he tries this. He raises his sword, thinking he has to try. The boss charges straight at him. Alicia screams when she sees the scene in front of her. Rude thinks that, first, he needs to gather mana from inside his body. Then he has to picture it flowing into the sword. The boss stares at the protagonist and attacks. At the last second, Rude opens his eyes and ends the battle with a single strike. Alicia is paralyzed. The boss has been defeated, but even the protagonist is confused by his own power. He looks around and says he actually pulled it off. The elf is in shock, saying the protagonist used mana to strengthen his sword even without training. Rude smiles, saying he tried to do it because he felt it was possible since his mana was overflowing. Suddenly, his sword cracks and breaks right in front of them. Alicia looks at the sword, not expecting that. Meanwhile, the protagonist panics and starts screaming the sword's name. Feeling defeated, Rude says he overused it, so there's nothing to be done. Elf says the sword couldn't handle the mana. Besides, she understands how he feels, since a weapon is like an extension of one's body. The protagonist says that's enough for today, and mentions he'll grab some meat from the boss. Meanwhile, on the 7th floor of the Miasma dungeon, The boy from before is in combat. He uses his fire powers to attack a level 17 giant rat. His teammates are also helping fight the rats. The one in the black cloak strikes one of the rats and finishes it off with ease. After a long battle, they finish clearing the area. The young man comments that these are a superior species of miasma rats. The big rat is a tough enemy. His teammates smile and say that even so, they couldn't beat their teamwork. They all start laughing together, but the one in the black cloak looks back, and the leader asks what's wrong. The boy starts walking, saying it's nothing much. He just thought he heard voices. Suddenly, they find a staircase and thinking it's a secret passage, they decide to check it out. As they descend, the three of them are amazed, because right there in front of them is a glowing chest. The boy observes carefully and says it doesn't seem to be a trap. While the others think it might be a treasure, they find a sword inside the chest. The boy says he can feel magic coming from it. The three of them get excited, thinking it's a powerful sword, and they'll be able to sell it for a good price. Regard asks if they're sure it's not a cursed sword, but the leader tells him not to be so negative. He explains that since they haven't found the protagonist around, they've been struggling to make easy money. That means this is a gift sent to them. Regard agrees with that. The boy in the black cloak smiles, saying it's getting late. It's good if the sword is a blessing. Regard comments that he'd heard Root has been hanging out with a pretty elf. The two start laughing, saying he's getting cocky, and they're going to teach him a lesson to remind him of his place. They start leaving the room, but Regard stays behind, staring at the chest. He begins to closely examine the open chest. While Regard was looking, the sword tried to influence its wielder to eliminate all the others. The next day in the border town of Bologna, the protagonist and the elf are walking through the streets, and he comments that he thought about asking an old weapon vendor for advice. They head to a place called Miner's Hammer Weapon Shop. The shop owner, named Dome, begins examining the protagonist's sword. He says that for a sword forged by him to break like that, only brute force could have caused such damage. Dome asks what the protagonist put into the sword, named Whispers of Alicia, and if he plans to tell them. Root replies that yes, he'll tell them everything, because he's known old Dome for a long time and trusts him deeply. After hearing the story, Dome is intrigued to learn that if the protagonist eats monsters, he gains their powers. He comments that this explains why Root's power has increased so much. The elf girl says Dome doesn't seem very surprised. The old man comments that if it tastes good, it doesn't matter what you eat. Dome adds that the most important thing now is that the protagonist wants a sword that can handle a lot of mana. He emphasizes that because of the time required for research, it'll take a while to forge it. Root asks if there's anything he can do to help. The old man replies that it would be great if he could get some high-quality magic stones. The protagonist says he has some materials with him. As soon as he drops the stones on the table, Dome is impressed. He suspects they include the stone of the General Lizard, Baphomet, and even a Minotaur. He comments that it looks like Root's abilities have improved quite a lot. The protagonist gets embarrassed and says it feels good to be praised by the old man. Dome says that if he needs anything else, he'll let him know. While preparing a new sword, the old man gives him one to use for now. Dome warns him not to channel any mana into that sword under any circumstance, because if it breaks, the old man will charge him a fortune. The protagonist and Alicia get nervous but agree. As soon as they leave the shop, they go straight to the tavern. The elf girl suggests they avoid magic attacks for a while. Root comments that the old man becomes scary when it comes to weapons. Alicia smiles and says that even though Dome is intense, she's glad she got to meet one of his friends. The protagonist gets awkward and apologizes for being so lonely. She starts laughing, and then the boy from earlier enters, saying it looks like they're having fun. He asks if he and his friends can join, calling the protagonist the Miasma Butcher. Root gets irritated and says it's happening again. The elf girl looks at them and asks if they've got a problem with them. Because if they do, they can settle it by drinking like good adventurers. Ramba starts trembling with rage and suddenly loses his balance, falling under the table. The leader gets worried and asks if he'd been drinking alone, but then he notices Rondo hasn't sold the sword he found in the dungeon yet. The sword starts releasing a strange aura that urges him to attack everyone there. He tries to resist, but the sword's influence drives him insane. Rondo tries to stop himself, but is overtaken by the sword's rage and yells at the leader to shut up. He charges forward screaming and attacks his companion. Rigard is confused seeing Magnus being struck. Still consumed by rage, Rondo turns and targets the elf girl, but Rude steps in and blocks the attack, saying this won't be solved with a drink. Magnus starts to collapse after being wounded. Rigard stays worried, not knowing what to do. The protagonist keeps staring at Rondo. Rude keeps watching him, trying to understand what's going on with that guy. Other adventurers get angry and ask what Rondo is doing in the middle of the celebration. One of the men tries to hold him back, but the sword keeps releasing more power. With a single blow, Rondo defeats the adventurers. Alicia apologizes to the innkeeper for what she's about to do, but says she has to destroy everything. She casts her magic and hits Rondo, sending him flying and wrecking the whole place. They approach the hole in the wall and wonder what's going on with that guy. Alicia is shocked to see Rondo getting back up, saying he's going to defeat everyone there. Rude asks if she went easy on the attack. The elf girl says a regular adventurer shouldn't be able to get up after taking a direct hit like that. Rondo starts making strange noises and charges again, yelling that he'll finish them all. The protagonist runs at him, yelling that this is wrong. Alicia asks one of the adventurers to take care of the injured. The two start clashing again. Rude takes the opportunity to analyze Rondo's status and sees that he's level 22, but with his mind in a state of madness. The protagonist continues only defending himself, thinking the guy has gone into berserker mode. The sword releases even more power. Rudy realizes that compared to the normal Rondo, his stats are way higher now. Alicia yells at the protagonist to get out of the way. He looks at her, and she already has her magic ready, saying that this time she'll go all out. Rude jumps to the side and the elf girl fires her attack, but the sword says face it and begins to absorb all the energy. Alicia can't believe the sword actually managed to absorb that damage. She notices the sword is emitting even more energy, completely covering the boy's body. Alicia yells at the protagonist to be careful, because that's a cursed sword. Rude looks at Rondo and asks if he's getting stronger by absorbing that magic. The boy is already surrounded by several things around his body. He can't speak anymore, and only attacks. The protagonist blocks the blow, but realizes Rondo's strength increases with each moment. He keeps defending, but the boy doesn't stop attacking for even a second. Rude begins to counterattack, aiming for non-lethal points, and hits one of Rondo's legs, but he's surprised to see the tentacles closing the wound. Alicia watches worried as she can't help the protagonist. Her magic could be absorbed by the sword and make it even stronger. Even so, she doesn't want to just stand by and thinks that if she really wants to help her partner, she needs to find an opening and land a decisive strike. Suddenly, Rigger appears, begging them not to finish off Rondo. He keeps yelling, saying he knows they made a lot of mistakes with him, but even though he was a failure and lived to spies, his companions became his family. With tears in his eyes, he begs for his friend's life. Rude steps forward, saying he'll do his best. Rondo keeps screaming and attacking. The protagonist says he'll try substitution and warns that no one should interfere. The elf girl smiles and says she understands. He dodges an attack, thinking that when he used this technique with Alicia, it took about 10 seconds. Rondo keeps attacking non-stop while the protagonist dodges everything, thinking the problem is keeping the boy under control for those 10 seconds while he tries to break the curse. The protagonist takes a hit that pushes him to the side. Alicia screams in concern, but he had blocked with his sword, saying the strikes are very strong. He grabs the arm holding the sword, thinking that if he can immobilize just the sword, he can hold on. Rondo tries to break free, but Rude starts using his skill. The boy can't break his arm free. Rude uses earth magic to bind Rondo, since he won't be able to absorb that type of magic. The boy is completely immobilized. Rude lets go of Rondo's arm and approaches, thinking that if the cause of the madness is the curse, he can free him the same way he did with Alicia. That way he can bring him back to normal. Rude activates substitution and hits Rondo's chest. A dense aura begins to pour out, but the protagonist doesn't back down and keeps trying to use his skill. Little by little, Rondo begins to return to normal. Magnus and Regard watch everything. Rondo starts crying, asking for help. The protagonist remains determined to remove the curse from the boy, but it starts fighting back. Suddenly, Rudy is launched far away. Alicia screams in worry, and the protagonist says he's fine, but the substitution failed. Rondo is taken over by the curse again, and the prison Rudy created begins to crack. The protagonist thinks it wasn't Rondo who rejected the substitution. It felt like the sword had a will of its own. So if he can weaken the sword, maybe he can stop the curse. He starts firing fire attacks at Rondo before the strike hits. The boy breaks free. The protagonist is concerned because he only managed to remove the curse from Rondo's left arm. But now, like this, he just needs to attack from outside the right arm's range. Rondo's body is almost entirely covered by tentacles. Rudy notices Rondo is moving in a strange way. He managed to move, and the attack went directly into the sword, which absorbed all the magic. The sword reached an extremely high level of mana and released all the energy into Rondo's body, making him scream in pain. A massive pressure with a dense aura began to spread. Alicia watches, thinking that was the incarnation. Rondo's arms and legs began to change form, showing that his body was no longer his own. Rude uses his analysis ability. The system shows that what's in front of him is the two-headed curse called Graham, a cursed race with the condition of incarnation. In seconds, the curse attacks the protagonist, but he manages to dodge. Rude keeps fighting hard against the creature, but Graham's attacks are extremely powerful. The protagonist is hit and thinks Graham is too fast, but upon analyzing more carefully, he realizes the curse simply doesn't waste movements like an experienced warrior. Suddenly, Graham appears behind the protagonist, who turns around to face the attack. The elven girl, seeing her partner in danger, decides to act and channels magic through her body. She charges forward and lands a flying kick on Graham, but he uses his tail to steady himself. Alicia takes advantage of the close distance and fires a powerful attack that sends the monster flying. Graham crashes into a wall with a loud noise. Alicia says that apparently she'll have to get a bit more involved in the fight. Rude thanks her, saying he didn't know she was good at close combat. Alicia responds that a mage who becomes dead weight when the enemy gets close is a burden to her companions. She puts her hand on her injured arm and says this isn't an enemy they can fight carelessly, and that Rude needs to decide quickly because the curse has already spread too far. Graham stands back up again, and the elven girl says that if they don't fight to finish it, they won't be able to stop it. The protagonist hesitates to make a decision, but then prepares himself and says he understands. The healer asks Magnus to stay still, but he begins to get up and calls out to Regard. He asks if he heard what Alicia said earlier. Meanwhile, the two continue fighting the curse, but even together they can't find an opening. The protagonist thinks that maybe two heads have widened Graham's field of vision. He yells for the elven girl to fall back for a while, and though confused, she obeys and steps away from the curse. Rude slants his hand on the ground and creates several magic circles that raise a wall. Alicia sees it and thinks she understands. If they use magic only to raise the wall, Graham won't be able to absorb it. In the middle of the wall, a human-shaped shadow appeared, and the curse noticed it. It turned and attacked the shadow with everything it had, but it was just a clay dummy made to distract. The real Rudy was behind it. Without hesitation, the protagonist landed a powerful strike directly on Graham. This created an opening for Alicia, who was already in position, ready to attack. She began casting her magic, invoking the Earth Spirit in a tribute spell. The Earth Spirit appeared. Its name was Nomiya. Alicia used Nomiya's power and struck the curse with a powerful earth attack, but she grew worried when she saw the blow hadn't defeated the curse. Suddenly, Graham attacked her. Out of nowhere, Regard grabbed the curse's arm, stopping the attack. Rude was surprised to see the two of them fighting. Crying for his friend, Regard shouted that he'd stop Graham even if it cost him his life. Magnus also charged in, shouting that the three of them together would land a decisive blow on the heart of the curse. Graham began to scream in pain as Magnus held strong, even with tears falling from his face. All three of them collapsed together to the ground. The curse was defeated. The price was the life of their companion, friend, and brother. Rudy and Alicia remained silent, just watching the scene. Even unable to express the pain of loss, Rudy noticed a sword lying on the ground beside them. He approached and picked up the sword. Rude thinks that even if he hides the sword, he can't know when the next victim will appear. Suddenly, the sword begins talking to him, telling him to destroy everything and everyone. Rude stares at the sword and uses his unique skill. The system announces that the sword is very strong. The curse has been nullified. The protagonist tells the sword to shut up, saying that empty words don't work on him. Suddenly, Lankars opens the guild door, asking if everyone is all right. Rondo is lying on the ground. His body is vanishing. Rudy holds the sword and says it's over. Lankars sees it all and asks them to meet at the guild to clarify what happened. After the explanation, Lankars says it looks like Rondo became stronger because of the sword's curse. With Magnus's testimony, the other adventurers begin to discuss what happened. The guildmaster sees the protagonist holding the sword and asks if he feels anything when touching it. Rude replies that thanks to his unique ability to nullify abnormal statuses, no curse has any effect on him. As long as he is the sword's bearer, there will be no more victims. Lankars says he understands, but warns that if one day the protagonist is overtaken by the curse, Rude interrupts and says that when that day comes, the master must do whatever is necessary. The elven girl seems a little distressed by that. Lankars thanks the protagonist and Alicia for containing the incident. As for Magnus in Regard, the master says he'd like to offer his condolences, but no one there will have time to rest. The elven girl asks if something happened. The guildmaster explains that all the adventurers there with him were shunned for this reason. He says that lately the number of monsters outside the dungeons has been increasing abnormally. It seems these new monsters are coming from a recently discovered dungeon in Bello. According to research, the cause of this is a certain monster. Rude asks what kind of monster it is. Lankar says it's the miasma dragon, Besalista. He comments that he's only seen this monster in books, but the estimated level is around 70. The protagonist is impressed. The guildmaster says the level isn't the problem, but rather the concentration of miasma. They say its miasma stimulates other monsters, making them leave the dungeon. This caused casualties among the research team, and those who managed to return are being treated now. Lankar states that if this continues, it won't stop with the monsters because the miasma will escape the dungeon. The damage to nearby areas would be immense, which is why he called everyone there. Rude says he understands the situation and asks to be taken to the research team that made it back. They head to the medical ward. The protagonist approaches one of the injured, who is in severe pain. With a gentle touch, Rudy begins to use his substitution skill. Lankars watches and says it's unbelievable. The elf girl just smiles from a distance. The adventurer, who was screaming in pain, can now sleep peacefully. The guildmaster says it's surprising. He didn't know the protagonist could cancel status effects on others too. Rude explains he can only do it if the person being touched doesn't reject it, and that's why the only ones joining the dragon hunt will be him and Alicia. One of the adventurers says, "That's madness." Lankar stares straight at the protagonist and asks what the chances of victory are. Rude explains that the fewer people he has to protect from the miasma, the easier it will be to move around. Besides, he's already used to fighting powerful opponents alone. The adventurer says the protagonist sounded very confident just now, but it's still risky. The guildmaster sighs and pats the protagonist on the shoulder, saying he understands and accepts. He will entrust the mission of defeating the miasma dragon, Besalista, to the protagonist. Night had fallen, and when everything settles down, the protagonist and the elf girl begin to leave. He says they need to get good rest to be ready for the next day. She asks if everything will really be okay with just the two of them. Rude smiles and says he can only use all his skills when no one else is around. He lowers his head and apologizes to Alicia for dragging her into this mess. She asks what he's talking about and says that if he had gone alone, he would have gotten beaten up right then and there. Rude says they're a team and just the two of them are enough to save everyone. She jumps happily and agrees with him. That's all for today. Please leave a comment and I'll see you on the next upload.